So hello and welcome to Intuitive Connection. I'm your host, intuitive counselor and spiritual guide, Victoria Shaw. And today we have a guest who's come here to share with us a really cool topic. And I'm really excited. And our guest is Kevin Carton. I'll tell you a little bit about him before I invite him onto the stage. He's an inspirational speaker, teacher, transformational life coach, certified by the Brave Thinking Institute. He empowers people to discover their soul's purpose, which is what we're going to talk about today. With over a decade of experience, he's helped hundreds of people break through limitations, rewire their subconscious mind, and trust themselves more deeply so they can take bold steps in turning their dream into a reality. He's spoken on stages in front of thousands of people, sharing his old soul wisdom, which also led him to be described as a young Bob Proctor. I don't know who that is, but I bet you some of our people might. He shares weekly insights along with his brother, Chris Carton, on their podcast, Science and Spirituality, which has 1.3 million downloads and listeners in 113 countries around the world. That is very impressive, my friend. And when he's not serving others in his coaching business, he loves to go on date nights with his wife, soulmate Vivian, snowboarding in the mountains in the winter, and spending time with his cat Autumn in their home near Denver, Colorado. All right. That was a lot of an introduction. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Victoria. And I appreciate you reading the whole bio. Some people just, truncate it because it is, shorter.
I usually do truncate it, but I was in a
appreciate it.
Yeah. And what most of the listeners don't know is this is the very first time I've recorded a guest interview with the cameras on. And so we're going to be taking some of this material and popping it over on YouTube. So if you want to see my guest's beautiful face and you're listening to this on another platform, you'll now be able to find at least part of the interviews over on YouTube. But you were probably wondering when I was reading this, because I realized I had the piece of paper like over my face.
So you're getting used to it.
You can tell I'm not used to doing this on a visual platform, but we'll get there. Anyway, welcome, my friend. We're going to talk about purpose today. But before we get there, you have a kind of interesting story. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how you discovered your purpose?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And it was not in a very straightforward way, which is, I think, a very common experience.
Yeah,
that people
I'd
have.
say that.
Unless I would argue to say maybe there is ways that it could be much more smooth. But for most people, I think it's going through some of what some people call like a dark night of the soul, or some significant challenge, something that really challenges you so that you have to really think about your life and say, am I actually living the way I want to live? So that was me ultimately back in 2013. I chose a career path that was very logical, made sense, also lined up with some part of my purpose, what I really love, science, given that, as you mentioned, my podcast that I host with my brother. So I still love science, but I went into pharmacy. That was my first choice in career path. And it was very logical because it was, a good 6-figure salary when you graduate. I was going to be helping people. But about 3.5 years in, I started to actually get into personal development, also started to awaken to holistic healing, and realized the path that I was on was not aligned with what really I held as a core value. And I didn't really want to just continue to perpetuate a system that treats symptoms rather than the cause of disease. So that was like my ultimate moment where I felt like I was out of alignment. But it was a very difficult choice to leave that path because it was so set up for me, again, so guaranteed that I was going to be making good money, a lot of security, prestige, all that. But ultimately, I did decide to leave, and that's just like a short story of it. But that is ultimately what led me on this whole journey of discovery. Like, what would I love? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Ultimately, I knew it wasn't pharmacy. So I started off with just knowing what it wasn't, and that's what began it.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. I mean, you said so much in there, and I think so many of us go through life, especially when we're younger. But sometimes, I really made a big, 180 in my 40s. We go through life on other people's terms, right? What we're taught is valuable, what we're taught is important, what we're taught how the game is played, right? What we're taught is going to bring us joy, what we're taught is going to bring us success, notoriety, whatever we think that we're supposed to be looking for. And in that process, we lose connection with our soul self that always knows the unique ways that we have come to earth to express ourselves and to share our soul's gifts. So I think more and more people, you have to kind of recognize what's wrong with everything that you've been spoon fed throughout your life, and often by people that love you, and they've been spoon fed the same mush, so they think that's food. You have to kind of get to that place of dissatisfaction when you wake up and go, oh, this isn't bringing me joy. Now I want to figure out what is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. 100%. Starts
Yeah.
usually with, yeah, I know what I don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very powerful mode of learning in this life. Right.
Definitely.
And I think some people take a long time to come around to,
Agreed.
what I don't like. So you got to the end of this pharmacy thing. You knew that's not what you wanted to do. How did you figure out what you did?
It was a process of discovery for sure, and exploring,
Okay.
experimenting. I think I had the blessing. I mean, a big part of it was my own courage to take the leap of faith and leave. But big part of the blessing of that was I was 21, quite young, not a lot of responsibility, had space to mess up and just try things out. I think as we get older in life, like as responsibilities come on and like, bills and kids and jobs and all these different things, like they weigh on us as, or even expectations of family members and friends. And like, we play into the role, right? So if we do that for such a long period of time, I've seen a lot of my colleagues who are also coaches, as well as some clients who are way older than me, have a significant challenge in actually just being willing to experiment.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was a big blessing, but that really was the same path of just experimenting, like what's next? And I
Yeah.
started off with just discovering, all right, well, and this is the question I asked myself. I got support from a coach myself before I ever discovered that I wanted to be a coach. But my coach, she helped me by asking if time, age, money, education, or any other limiting factor was not in the way. If that was the case, then what would you love for your life?
Wow.
Very powerful question. And I stayed in that. It wasn't just a one time thing where I would journal on it for 15 minutes and then be done. I spent months, if not a whole year, in that question and then exploring different avenues of what came to my mind and what really lit my heart up and felt right for me. And one of those earlier paths was in yoga, teaching yoga. And I loved it. I did that for actually 2 years before I discovered the next stage or step in my journey. But it was a part of the process. And that was something that really resonated with me. It had a lot of core components of what I feel is my purpose, which is being a teacher, but a speaker, a leader, guiding, or a guide, you can say. So those are core components. And now I've found it now in my coaching business, but it was still a part of it. But I didn't get to that immediately. It was
Yeah.
following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah. And I think that's always how it works because you
Yeah.
are, those are the people that follow my show know we are big fans here on conscious creation, the law of attraction, and the idea that you are
Nice.
creating your life as you are living it, which means that
Mm,
it's unfolding before you. And when you recognize what you don't want and start to tap into what you do, you're really like following a whole nother thread, a whole nother way of being. And those things will continue to present themselves and evolve. But so often we ask our intuition or life, to tell us the whole answer at once, right? Okay, I know I don't want to be in pharmacy school. Tell me tomorrow everything for the rest of my life,
right.
right? And we want that security. I mean, that's why some people, become a pharmacist, right? Because you know how that's going to play out for you
Yep.
over, the course and span of your lifetime. Now, I've worked with many people that started on one path and found another one later on. But the thing is that, it's always evolving. And oftentimes we have to even conceptually, learn to understand and grow into our new selves. And so I love what you're saying about following the breadcrumbs because
Mm,
that's how it's always works. That's how intuition works, right? It's one little step at a time
right.
that gets you there. And that desire to have the whole answer at once often limits us, wouldn't you think?
Oh, 1,000%. And
Yeah,
actually, a beautiful analogy that you're speaking of when you mentioned the word unfolding, and you have a beautiful tapestry behind you of it seems like a sunflower.
it
Think of
is.
just how a flower grows or anything in nature. It doesn't just jump from one stage to a completely new stage like that. It is literally an unfolding. And every single day, or even you can get down to like every single minute of that flower's life, from the bud to eventually, yes, the full bloom, it's actually part of the journey of that flower, and you cannot skip a step.
Yeah.
It's not
And
meant to be.
yeah, you don't want to, because all the steps
Exactly.
are delightful and amazing and fun.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Or at
love
least
that.
can be when you treat it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. When you
It's the
understand
treating
it
of it.
that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, because if you fight against it and you're like, I need all the answers now, or I don't understand how this is helping me. And so I'm going to resist it or blame myself
Yeah,
for it or then we get uncomfortable.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
the resistance is really what causes the trouble
Yeah.
rather than just actually trusting your own path.
Yeah.
As difficult as it is, right? Like those early months, I recall, I mean, it's a decade ago now, but still, I recall several times throughout like a given like month or say a season that I would be riddled with doubt and worry and fear of like, did I make the right choice? And what am I doing with my life? Especially when like there wasn't like some guarantee on the horizon of like what's
Right.
next. But it started to unfold. Like it was within a first few months. Like one of my first opportunities, actually, by the way, just kind of synchronistically it just happened, but it unfolded, right? I was looking for something different. And at the time in my college, I pledged a fraternity. And so it was a national fraternity. And I was on just literally on Facebook, I kid you not, just scrolling through my Facebook feed. And I wasn't technically looking for a job, but I was in my conscious awareness, like thinking, like, all right, what is next? Didn't know what I wanted next though. But there was an opportunity that popped up on my newsfeed. My national fraternity posted a job listing to become a house advisor for one of the largest chapters in the nation. And I applied for it and I got it. And it was a fantastic like bridge opportunity. I only did that job for about 9 months, but it was a perfect bridge opportunity, which ultimately helped me actually go through the process of getting trained as a yoga teacher because I
Wow.
had that part-time job. It was like maybe 5 or 10 hours a week, very minimal work. And then there was an opportunity where I was living to get trained as a yoga teacher. So like I don't think that I would have had the opportunity, like not only the time, but also the money to
Right.
actually go for that yoga teacher training if it wasn't for that opportunity that I got and just in a way dropped in my lap. But I
Right.
was looking for something.
Yeah. I love that. And I feel too, it's like oftentimes the best things are just dropped in our lap. You
Yeah.
set that intention, you forget about it, and the answers find you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because you become a vibrational match. You mentioned the law of attraction
Yep.
before. It's so important to remember that like attracts like. And
Mhm.
so the thoughts you're thinking, the feelings you energize over time and most dominantly experience, then therefore influence the actions you take. And of course, you're going to attract to you or receive in like kind to the
Yeah.
thoughts, emotions, and actions you've taken.
And you're going to attract in exactly what you need. And I think the other thing is oftentimes, we have a conundrum, we have a problem, and we try to, because we've been taught to do this, we try to map it out and figure it out. And oftentimes, like, there's a bigger plan that can figure it out so much more elegantly than you can. And you just have to wait for those opportunities to arrive. You tune
Yes.
in and you feel like, okay, does this feel right? And if it feels right, you take it. And
Mm.
then the next one will come, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. I'm actually curious for you, Victoria, because that right there, that point, I mean, that really covers life itself, like in how we are living life and how we can live more of a life we love is to actually trust, right? But
Right.
I'm curious, do you and your audience like speak of like, or if you have a relationship with like your higher power, God, the universe? Okay, because that to me is like some of the more juicy reasons why all of that works.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you actually really
Yeah.
touch on
This is absolutely a spiritual podcast.
that. Okay, true, true. But
It
everyone has
is.
their own belief. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
I don't step on other people's religious or spiritual toes. Personally,
Mm,
I feel we all have our own unique and direct connection to our true spiritual selves. And how you conceptualize that for you is really for you alone,
mm,
because what makes sense to you is what matters. But yeah, this is definitely a spiritual podcast. I often use terms like higher self,
mm,
soul, people like universe, God. I'm open to all of them. I just
nice.
believe that we're all part of the divine, right?
Beautiful. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
So you get
great.
as woo, as spiritual as you want. We are all on board here.
Amazing. Well, I thank you for that because that if I may I just add a point to what you were sharing
Yes,
before?
sir.
Okay, because I think it's so important for us to continually come back to the reasoning why it is so true what you shared that when you ask, you will receive, but it's the staying open to that receiving.
Yeah.
And again, the law of attraction will take its course. But the reasoning why, it's because there is one basis or one energy, one source of all things.
Yeah.
There's no other way of cutting it up or looking at it. And there's different paths, of course, right? But like I have a deep respect for all major religions as well. And like one, for example, that a lot of people I think in the spiritual community have like sometimes challenged with like connecting with is Buddhism, because they have so many gods.
Right.
But even in Buddhism, there is Brahma, and that is the one God. But then the rest are just deities that are just like uh fractals, you could say, of the one, right? So it really still all comes down to one source. And
Yeah.
as you know, I still love science. Even a scientific perspective proves that, or shares that. That the most widely accepted scientific theory of the beginning of our universe is the Big Bang. And the Big Bang still states that it all came from one infinitesimally small point of matter. And
Yeah.
then everything came, blew apart. So like it's still all connected.
Yeah.
So if anyone has ever been like I say that or share that just because I know, at least for myself in the past, I would have challenge or struggle with feeling 100% in trust with my own intuition, or believing that my thoughts really can make a difference and change my life. But once you take it from that perspective and deepen that understanding or belief,
Yeah.
then that changes everything. Then the actual application of what you just shared becomes not only natural, but empowered, like way more powerful.
For sure. That was beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. And you're making me think too, and I'm pivoting a little bit,
Sure.
but you're making me think, this word purpose, right? Because I've heard that used a lot of ways and sometimes in not super helpful ways.
Mm,
Like the mom that, came into my office and said, my 10-year-old hasn't found his purpose yet, or no, it was his passion. All right. Well, we'll
sure.
we'll let that one go, but purpose and passion. But let's let that one go. But let's go back to the idea of purpose, right?
Mm,
It feels to me that implicit in that word purpose is kind of a spiritual longing,
yes.
right? Because it's a desire to align with something greater than you. Like when we're thinking of purpose, we're thinking of service, we're thinking of something bigger than ourselves. So I wanted to throw that over to you
Sure.
and see what purpose means to you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. I'm glad you're shifting gears to this because obviously, like the topic being like purpose, right? And I know our
Cool.
previous conversations were connected, but yeah, to get straight to it, personally, I see purpose as a reason for being. It is as simple as that. But the reason for being doesn't have to be something that you're given. It can be chosen. And I think that's how it usually
Right.
starts.
Right.
Just choose something. Like we were going back, like just to share what we were talking about before, the experimenting, right? I don't think I would ever have come to know my purpose as a coach, as a leader, as a guide to help people awaken and discover their purpose and live their dreams if I hadn't just explored myself and see what lit me up. And that's why I said it's usually chosen first, because it comes back to the question that I shared before. What would you love?
Right.
If there's no limitations, time, age, money, education, any of those limiting factors were not limiting, what would you love? The answer to that question often connects with just the things that we feel most joy about, that we are happy about, that just draws our interest the most. And naturally, that becomes our purpose over time, just because I believe we're here in human experience to express more of our love and joy, to experience more of that. I actually believe that we're literally sourced in love, that we are loved into existence.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Like we're given a gift of life every day, as long as we're alive, obviously, right? But like we didn't do anything to deserve our heartbeat. We didn't do anything to deserve the breath that we just took unconsciously. I mean, sometimes we can control our breath and we choose to, and it helps. But all these things, the heart, the breath, I mean, our whole body, it's an absolute gift that we're given each day, and it's not a guarantee. So every day is really a gift for us. And so from that, why are we here? What's the purpose? Why are we given this gift of life? And that, I mean, personally, my answer is to experience more love, to give more love, to have more joy in our life. And that ultimately is why I feel that our purpose does connect with our joy and happiness. But it really is as a meaning for being, or a reason for being.
Yeah.
So
1,000%. And you said something, well, you said so much, so beautiful and so important in there. And we are totally, you're speaking to the choir on the other side of this Zoom. But you said something else that implicitly that I think is really important. I think some people get purpose confused, like they feel like there's something I should be doing.
yeah,
They're trying to discover their should. And that takes you out of it, right? Because there isn't a should.
exactly. Like, put it this way, I wholeheartedly agree. Think of how, and this is just way more proven now in psychology and lots of research that shows this, that humans are meaning making machines. To say it in a different way, to be specific or just as clear as I possibly could be, humans create meaning. We're the ones who put meaning on anything. There's actually a great book. I would highly recommend this resource as like a deep dive into that one little concept, but just so powerful. And I'm curious if you've heard of it. It's called The Fifth Agreement by Don Miguel Ruiz.
I haven't read it yet.
Okay, get
Get
it,
it?
read it, listen to it. I actually only listened to it on audiobook. I never read a physical copy of it, but is incredible. I've read the Four Agreements. The first one, the first book is fantastic, but the Fifth Agreement takes it to a whole new level.
Wow.
But the reason I'm suggesting it is because in the very beginning of that book, the first like few chapters, Don Miguel Ruiz shares his Toltec wisdom, which is from the Aztec, I believe, and that spiritual wisdom speaks about how we as humans, we create meaning for everything, and we create meaning through the symbols that we create with our words and the images we have in our mind for what we see in form.
Right.
So, for example, we say a tree, and I say that in English, people get an image in their mind of what a tree might be. But that tree, in its actual truth and its actual existence, has nothing to do with the actual vibration of the word tree
Right.
that we humans have created in our mind to convey that meaning. So it's like a meaning or a layer or a label on top of what the actual tree actually is. So the only way you can actually experience the truth of it is being in its presence, not thinking the thought tree.
Right.
So I say all that to say just that we create meaning. So it makes sense, since purpose is the reason for being, or it's a meaning.
Right.
Well, obviously we choose it then.
Right.
It's not something that is like given to us. I think it unfolds that way over time once
We're
you
we're just
choose.
we're
But
discovering it. We're
yes,
discovering it. And does
yes,
purpose change?
yes. Oh, all the time.
Because I think that's important too. Because I think some people, again, have this idea, right? I've found my purpose. It's a static thing, it's what I'm supposed to do. And now that I got it, dot, dot, dot. And I think
Yeah,
it would be more fluid and dynamic than that.
100%. There's a huge paradigm around purpose as like it's this one thing, or even it's like a job or like something you're doing. Like I
That's
say, yeah, 100%. Like it's very common. I personally think that purpose is more of a verb and something you're doing, you're experiencing, and that therefore can change, of course.
right. And you're living in, I mean, I think of purpose as living in alignment, which is another term I throw around a lot, when we're living more and more in alignment with our soul, with the
Mm,
divine, right?
yes.
And it's not anything necessarily that you're doing or not doing. It's not like yoga is more purposeful than sunbathing. For me, sunbathing is a spiritual practice.
Nice.
But it's about how you do things and how you
Right.
live, tuning into your intuition, being more present, listening more deeply, letting go of, if you're gonna make meaning, having that meaning be fulfilling to you,
Yes.
right? Experiencing and allowing in more well-being and making that your goal. I think, to me, that's what it means to live a purposeful life.
Mm. Well said. I concur.
Beautifulness. All right. So this has been so fun. I don't even know where I want to go next. I have to tune in. I have so many worrying questions, but I do think let's talk to the person now, because I get these a lot as clients. So I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that they don't know what their purpose is, and they're
Mm,
feeling a little bit rudderless, and they're feeling like a little bit, okay, I've been listening to you guys talk, and you seem to have something I want,
mm,
but I don't know how to get there. What do you say to
mm.
those people?
Oh, start exploring in terms of what you're curious about and what would you love. But as I mentioned before, I just want to take a page out of the book of my journey, that when I didn't know myself, I started to explore, but it wasn't just like a 15-minute journaling exercise. It was a commitment to a way of life, of exploring, of like on a daily basis, I was asking myself, what would I love? And if there was any inkling or spark of interest, I would start following down that path. And there was many paths that just started to fade away pretty quickly. Like one example, when I'd left pharmacy school, I was in network marketing, so direct sales. And I had a great product. I thought it was like a healthy energy drink. I really enjoyed it, especially being a 21-year-old kid in college. And so that was one path that I took. There was some energy, no pun intended, there was some energy to it. But in terms of like what my feeling of like love for it, right? But in a few months later, it just kind of fizzled out. But I didn't beat myself up thinking like, oh man, I failed at that, or oh, that part of my purpose is now gone, or it's not it, and like loathing it. But it was actually a beautiful opportunity to recognize again what I didn't want. But the more you explore, the more you find out, right? But I think the real key for anyone who is struggling is to really give yourself permission to explore.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot to be said of why someone would hold themselves back from exploring or thinking, like we talked about before, like wanting to happen like so quickly or it has to happen now. There's a lot of patience involved, a lot of trust. And those are the things to really work on more so than finding out some other different thing to do, to be honest, because it really is as straightforward as like there's the classic phrase, follow your bliss.
Right. And it sounds to me as you're talking, I think we've said this before, purpose is it's a way of being. It's
Yes,
not a thing that you do, meaning you're not out there to figure out that to crack the code and figure out that one thing. You're out
exactly.
there to explore life and experience life in a new, dynamic, intuitive, soulful way where you're going to start to listen to those little nudges. You're going to start to follow your curiosity. You're going to learn more and more what lights you up. And you're also going to be open to the fact that in following this path, you're never going to get there.
Right.
You're never going to get there. You're just going to keep exploring and keep growing and keep enjoying. And on the way, you're probably going to do some amazing things like, have a top rated podcast and, stand in front of thousands of people. But your life will keep evolving. Your life will
Mm-hmm.
keep evolving. It's what it's supposed to do. And sometimes you're going to find yourself selling an energy drink and recognize, ooh, this sounded really fun. And I really enjoyed it until I didn't enjoy it anymore. And now I'm going to do something else.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's beautiful. All right. This is a podcast about intuition. And intuition and purpose to me, look, people can see go like this. I'm crossing my fingers. I've never been able to do a visual before, but
Right.
most of my peeps are still listening, right? But no, they go hand in hand, right? So I would love to hear a little bit about where intuition comes in for you in living that purposeful life.
Oh my gosh, it was cornerstone to even discovering where I was at and what I was not happy with, and ultimately making the decision to leave that path of career in pharmacy. Like that intuitive voice was at first like a very light whisper, like, this is not for you. And I would ignore it. Or if I did actually like pay attention to it, it would not feel good
Right.
because I would be acknowledging like, wow, like, am I really not in the right path? Like I'd spent 3.5 years, tens of thousands of dollars. I had some loans. Like my parents had paid a lot of my way through college, even with the loans that I still had. Like my friends were there. Like there was again, like that commitment to all that. So hearing my intuitive voice say, yeah, this is not for you, leave. It was like against everything that actually like felt right for me at first, but that kept coming back, kept coming back until eventually it was like so loud I could not ignore it. And the signs were so written on the wall. Like I was starting to get depressed. I didn't want to go to class anymore. My grades were starting to slip, like all of that. So it was very clear toward the end. But if I'd listened sooner, then some of those signals would have been less harsh, I would say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was one of the more prime examples. But I will say, let me put it this way, why I'm highlighting just that part of my journey again is because it was so significant. When I finally listened to my intuition and left, it was within a year that I actually got a job working for a life coaching company that
Wow.
ultimately started my whole career path in this industry. That's why in my bio I say I have 10 years of experience because that was 2014.
Wow.
So that would not have happened, and I could not have ever predicted that there would be a job waiting for me, which by the way I didn't have a degree for. Like
Right.
when I applied, there was two other people that were like in the top like running for it, and they both had journalism degrees. And I got the job purely out of my own passion and my uh, desire for that position, that job, and working in that industry. So that's a longer story for another time, but it ultimately led me down that path. And pretty quickly, within a year, like completely switching industries and then being set up to be an expert in that industry in the next like several years of my life, like I could not have ever predicted that, but my intuition knew.
Right. Yeah, your intuition doesn't lie, right? Sometimes you can cover your eyes and cover your ears and say, I'm not ready to hear this yet. And that's okay. It'll keep talking. It
It
doesn't give
will.
up on you.
Yes.
But it always points you in the right direction. I mean, it can't not. And I think too, sometimes those times, I say this a lot, but those times when we're not following it,
Mm,
that's when we really know to listen, because
yes.
you'll keep ignoring it, and life will keep giving you validation that it was right. And so
Yep.
it's a sweet nudge to say, oh, maybe I should start listening more.
Exactly. May I share one other example?
Oh, please.
Okay, because I think this would really support and liberate some people too. Not only because it's very obvious when your intuition is saying like, yeah, not this at all. You don't know maybe what's next, but there is a clear indication like this is the pain. I want to get rid of this or transform it in my life. What happens when you've got things good?
Yeah.
Like things are good in life, like you're coasting along, like maybe health is great, your relationships are great, job is pretty good, money, like even keel, right? Like not significant issues. There's not that like soul longing or soul crushing like discontent. That was me when I had got that job in that life coaching company. I was working as a content developer. I wasn't getting paid a ton of money, but I was loving what I was doing because I was getting paid to help people in their life. But it was more on the back end. Like I would write some ebooks, I would ghostwrite for the life coach who started the company, I would edit videos, I would do a lot of behind the scenes work. 2.5 years later, I started to notice my intuition speak to me again of saying, you should get certified. You could do this. Start your own business, which sounded ridiculous because I was 24. Like, who's going to listen to a 24-year-old life coach? Like, I literally had those conversations in my head and noticed my own doubt of like, all like, who's going to listen to you? It's impossible, all of that. But a big part of the reason why like I would just not listen to that intuition like for the first like I don't know a few weeks, month or two, was because I was like, what are you talking about? I had a great job, things are going well. Like, don't rock the boat, basically. And sometimes that could be the greatest dream killer is actually like if things are so good that you're not willing to sacrifice the good for the great.
Right. No, that's a huge example for sure. And again, a lot of what you're talking to is following your intuition when it's asking you to do something that feels like a risk.
Exactly.
Right. And that act of trust of saying, okay, my mind says this is all fine. And why am I getting nudged? And listeners know, at least the ones who've been listening for a while, know that, a few years back, I uprooted my life and left a beautiful home, business, marriage
Mm,
on the East Coast to move to the West Coast, because I'd been hearing the nudges for, it was about 3 years. And again, they weren't
sure.
insistent. And I was I wasn't resistant to them. I was just waiting for everything to line up, to move cross country and change my life. And no regrets here. But I often find exactly what you said. More people move from a place of discomfort in search of comfort,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas for me, I was moving from a place of joy, and I had a really good marriage. I
Mm,
was ready for something different, right? I had a beautiful home. It's not like I stayed up night saying I hate living in Connecticut. I loved it. My town rocked. I just knew I was ready for something different and
yeah.
something more. And but there is that place of when we have to let go of an old foundation to build a new one. It can be challenging. It can feel
Yes.
like a lot. Especially, I always say, like, the nervous system, my human self needs a little hug right now, right? Because it doesn't
Good way of
always
putting it.
catch up with, but my soul knew, the
Mm,
soul knows. And of course, I always tell people you do not have to follow your intuition, to make the number of changes that I made in my life, or even the number of changes that Kevin made in his life. Oftentimes, the little nudges are subtle. They're like, hey, why don't you go to this store today? And you go to
Mm,
that store and you discover a new product that's like your new favorite thing. It can just
yeah.
be, all the ways in which life wants to surprise and delight you. It does not have to be these big decisions, but there are
Mm,
times I think when, we're ready to up level or grow and it's moving us a little bit out of our comfort zone. And I always say to people in those moments, don't stop listening, and be gentle with yourself because your intuition will never make you do anything that you're not ready, willing, and able to do.
mm,
And you can take your time, be gentle, but don't stop listening because the
mhm.
more you listen, the more it will guide you.
Agreed. Patience is such a virtue there
Yeah. Yeah,
with
for
it.
sure. Yeah. I get a lot of people, but when am I going to know? I'm like, well, probably when you relax and stop trying so hard.
Right. Exactly. It's such a
Yeah.
paradox, right?
Yeah, that's how it works, right? Again, law of attraction, right? When we are pushing and shoving and trying, we are creating resistance to receiving what we want. So we have to just be comfortable where we are and know everything all is well. And then, of course, we will receive it all.
Hmm.
Beautifulness. All right. I ask everyone on the show, how do you experience your intuition?
Ooh. I experience it in a couple of different ways. Most often, it is a thought that's quite calm. It's not frantic, speaks a fact, or says something like, do this, do that, don't go there, don't do that, whatever it is. Usually like a subtle thought. Like, and it's just one time, like quick little thought. And then it just my usual thoughts like will carry back or come back around. But usually that thought, if it's like a slight or like light or still small voices in scripture would say it, but that'll usually come back a few times. I experience it like that, but then there's sometimes it's not as often, but as a gut sense, like there's just some feeling that I get in my belly, my solar plexus. But then the one other that is just super interesting, it's not very frequent as well, but does happen, is in my dreams.
Yeah.
I'll literally wake up and be like, whoa, like, and there was a dream. And I'm so grateful that I have a partner who has a similar interest in dreams and like interpreting and getting the meaning out of it. So we'll often ask each other, oh, did you have any dreams last night? So we'll have the opportunity to share. And that's often where like I've heard from my intuition, but like actually decoding it comes when I talk with my wife.
I love that. Yeah, dreams can be like that sometimes. Oh, that's
Yeah.
so beautiful. All right. This was great. Yeah, I think all of those ways are really common for people.
Mm,
All right. So I guess I promised that we were going to wrap her up around 40 minutes. I could keep doing this though. This was so much fun. I have a feeling
mm,
we might have you back sometime. I would love for you really quickly too, because I know people are going to be really excited about this. I know they're going to be interested in working with you. Can you talk a little bit about like how that flows, how you support
mm.
people, and then of course we can segue into how they can find you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I often coach people through a program called the Dream Builder. I help people in not only discovering, but then actually building those dreams. There's a process I walk my clients through. And the first and foremost step is always first discovering or connecting with your own inner voice. And I have a meditation, it's a guided meditation that's free. That's called metacognition meditation. And it's all
Beautiful.
about connecting with that soul self. You actually mentioned it before, but it's who you are beyond your own thought, your own emotions, your own behaviors. It's the truest essence of who you are. There's many different labels and names, but that is an experience that you can have and connect with. It's not a thought to have or something to intellectualize. And that this guided meditation I created is a way of just guiding someone through that. But that the tool I learned from my mentor, she calls it noticing what you're noticing.
Love it.
I call it metacognition because that's the technical psychology term of thinking about what you're thinking about. So it helps just create space from any pattern, especially programming that would have you stay in, your old life or just not listen to your intuition. Like we have to reprogram and release old limiting beliefs. That is the one tool to really help with that.
Yeah, I think about that as just coming to that place of awareness where we can step back from the thinking mind without getting involved in it because that's where the wisdom lies. But I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. Beautifulness. Okay, so they want to connect with you, they want to listen to your podcast, they want the free meditation, they want to explore your coaching options. Help them do that.
Sure. So my website is kevincarton.com. So that'd be is easiest way to go, because at the very bottom of the first page, there's the Science and Spirituality podcast links there. There's also a couple of free gifts that I have on my main page. You can also find out more about coaching there. Our podcast is on any major platform for podcasting. We're also on YouTube now. But yeah, and then that meditation, I think you'll have a link for that, correct?
We
I
will.
give it to you.
You gave me a link. We'll stick it
Great.
in the show notes so people can find it there.
Awesome.
And then you can also find it over on his website. Kevin, this was really, really fun. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners before we sign off?
The one thing I always love to end off with in any podcast is just a reminder of your infinite power. You listening, that there is a power that is breathing you, that is a gift that you've been given, and there is a way for you to create whatever you would love in your life, to live your purpose, to overcome any challenge or pain that you're facing. But it's with that higher power. It's not in separation from it. So the more we connect, the more we build that relationship, the better we'll be.
Beautifulness. Thank you, my friend, so much
You're
for
welcome.
tuning in. This was such a joyous conversation. And thank you, listeners, because as you've heard me say before, if you guys weren't there, I wouldn't get to do this. And it's so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this one as much as I did. And namaste.